So I'm trying to remember when it was that I first got involved with Go. It was back in the pandemic, right?
Right.
And so we were in the middle of raising our son,
Yes.
Dylan, and then I started getting into it. What were some of your first reactions?
I think at that time, everything was so dead everywhere, and we were home trying to work / raise this baby, but I was surprised that you were into it, but it was kind of nice that you found some sort of hobby or thing to do during that time.
Yeah. We had that first weekend away or that first night away when Dylan was pretty young.
Oh, yeah.
And then I remember we just had the night to chill out in a hotel room without a baby.
Yeah.
And getting into like, oh, let me try this. Let me try to play some Go Problems. And
right.
And then did you think it was something that I was just going to sort of let go? And
yeah, I thought it'd be something you'd get into, read about, play with a little bit, and that then it would fade to, once pandemic was over and life kind of got back to its natural rhythm, that you probably weren't going to care about it or have time for it. I was wrong.
What was the point, or was there a point where you said to yourself, I don't get why he's so into this?
Yes, just from the perspective of I didn't connect with it. And I think when I met you, you were a person who was super into board games, it would make sense. It would compute. But, you were an athlete. You and I have never played board games or were attracted to them or, really cared for it. So I think in that sense, it's like, okay, like very unexpected. I think it was like at the point where you're like, I'm going to get tutors for this, for a game. I was like, okay, this is way more serious than I thought.
It's getting real.
Yeah.
This is All Things Go. We are going to spend some time talking about the differences of playing Go in person versus online. And so what I did was I made a post on Reddit asking the question and got some great responses back. So I wanted to coalesce them all down into a nice summary of pros and cons for playing in person versus online. And so let's start with in person. The first point I received was from Terda, who said that playing in person is more fun. There's the social, the human element. You're not just playing a nameless, faceless thing that could be a bot. And there's the interacting and there's the conversation. Then FredEd21 talked about how he or she or they almost always leave playing in person in a better mood. I'm not sure that I can say that I feel like that all the time, but I can certainly understand it. And that they actually played longer. So 3 to 4 hours, they can mix it up, they can watch others play. It actually serves as a way to de-stress after a long day of work and looking at a screen all day. Gaveling27 talks about how they play slower and they think through moves more when they're in person, and they love the feel of the actual stones. Saruman talks about the better sense for how serious an opponent is taking a game when you play in person, because you can get a sense for that. You can see if you're on the same wavelength, whether they're going to be more serious of a game or more casual of a game. And then Verbose Logger says that they think a lot more before every move when they're playing in person versus when they're online and take very little thought, and that often backfires for them. Kagami108 talks about how it's harder to cheat with AI in person, though I did speak in another segment of the podcast about some creative ways that pros are possibly trying to cheat in person. SF Go Club talked about the fact that you get a social and cultural immersion that can't be replicated online, and that you gain practical skills like learning how to score, which is not something that you practice online. It's just automatically done for you. And then Chrono9987, who is a 5 Dan, talked about how they still don't actually move the stones correctly at the end of the game to count, which I really appreciate them saying, even though they're a 5-dan. But Chrono9987 also talked about how there's more of a sense of community that they believed used to exist online on KGS. Roawa said that for the more beginner level player or novice player, it's hard to know when to end a game when you're in person, as well as how to do life and death and how to score, which is totally fair. However, if you're not just with a lower ranked player or a new player, having those higher ranked players around in person can be great because then they can explain it to you in real time and all those sorts of things. So that's really nice. Go Gabe Go talks about how it can be more fun in person if you do, in fact, enjoy being around people. Bore made the point that it's not immediately obvious on how you would record an in-person game, though there are systems like OGS where you can set up a demo board and actually record it in real time. You have to get used to remembering to put down each move as you play, because if you miss a spot, it will mess up the whole recording of the game. Spaded Soul talked about how it really helps to play in real life because you're able to learn and understand concepts in real time, and there's intentionality around playing the stones that you don't really get online. That was actually mentioned by Tef Flying Doge. For playing Go online, Terada talks about how practical it is. You can do it anywhere, anytime, as long as you have a Wi-Fi connection or some sort of data connection. You don't need a board, so there is some convenience there, and you can easily share and analyze a game. You also get a sense for what your rank is compared to other, just to understand your skill level, and you get to play a really diverse set of players. So I find myself personally, when I get to play, it's usually later at night, and I'm in the northeastern US. So a lot of times I will end up playing people in Thailand, in the Middle East, and things like this, which is really cool. And Terda, who is a 3-dan, says that at his level, he feels like he would need to play more online to really improve because you need that frequency of games. But for him, it's just not as enjoyable. And I'm using the pronoun him because I know Terda is a man. Freded21 says that playing online is tough because his eyes hurt from staring at the screen. I totally get that. I have lighter colored eyes, and most screens I have a hard time with, particularly with white light. But Freded21 said that he likes the sounds of the stones actually when he plays on the online Go server over the in-person stones. But perhaps that's because the quality of the stones in real life are not as good. Gavling27 said the online board and having that two-dimensional view of the board where you're sitting right over top of it feels easier. And I can actually understand that. It really depends on what you're used to, I suppose. If you started with playing in person first versus playing online first, I started playing online first. And I learned about this really interesting fact that when you play on a real wooden Go board, there is a direction of the grain on the wood that you need to make sure is pointed in the correct orientation, because the board is actually made to be slightly longer in the direction of the grain and shorter or narrower on the other side, because when you look at it from the angle that you're sitting at the board, there is a bit of a distortion of the shape of the board. And so keeping that board oriented in the right direction between you and the opponent has some sort of compensation to make the board look more square, which I thought was really cool. I learned about this from a player at my local club. Chapel Ever talks about because they learned online, they had trouble seeing cuts and liberty shortages on the board in person. Chrono9987 said there used to be that community of active chat rooms back in the day on KGS. There would be informal game reviews, there'd be discussions around different variations to play, and there was a whole different mix of rankings. And so Chrono9987 feels like the online community is more fractured today. I can't speak to that certainly because I've not been around long enough, but that's a really interesting point, so I appreciate that. Roawa talks about how if you're a beginner, it doesn't teach you to do the scoring online. However, it also does it for you, and it also makes sure that you don't do an illegal move. So that's actually really helpful. The other side to that, though, is that when you play online, there's a whole lot of trickery that can happen with the time controls. So, for example, I had a situation where, not knowing anything and being new to the game, I signed up for a game on OGS where the opponent had absolute time. We start playing the game, we get through the beginning, the middle, and then we get towards the end of the game, and I'm down to very little time. And what I noticed is that the opponent opponent is really just very quickly putting moves down, trying to catch me into running out of time. It felt like a trick. It didn't feel like we were actually playing on just the spirit and merits of the game. I really didn't like it. I don't know if it was intentional, but I learned from that moment on, don't accept games or don't set up games with absolute time. And then, of course, there are also the people that intentionally time out and then play a move or wait a long time, all these sorts of things. We could probably spend a whole episode talking about all the different ways that people bend the rules and different sorts of trickery online. Spaded Soul talked about how there are these really nice Discord servers for the community, and there are quite a few. There's one through Benkyo, there's one through Clausius, there's one for Telegraph Go. So I do encourage folks to go to those Discord servers because there is a pretty vibrant set of people talking about different aspects, and you can hear from them from all over the world. Groin also answered this question on the OGS forums and talked about how with online you have a much better supply of opponents, you get to play AI. There's also pattern search and puzzles. On the negative side of the online though, Groin is talking about how online is more prone to misunderstandings and the communication there can be less polite and respectful. People can get quite snippy. So that's the rundown for playing online versus in person, and I really appreciated the posts and responses. So we'll go ahead and put that in the episode notes. Gazza White is back with us again from the Pro Go Weiqi podcast to talk to us a little bit about a very unique tournament on the professional Go scene that has a special format called the Nongshim Cup. Let's have a listen.
The thing that I look most forward to every year is a tournament called the Nongshim Cup. And this isn't actually a world major. It's not an individual event. It's a team event. And it's between China, Korea, and Japan. And it has a very unique format. It's called Win and Continue, is what I've heard the format described.
Okay.
So each country has 5 players, and 2 of the countries will send out one of their players. And whichever player loses, they're eliminated from the tournament. They don't play any more games in the tournament. The winner stays, and they play a player from the 3rd country. So every game, one player is eliminated, and they keep playing until 2 countries all of their players have been eliminated. And the one country that's left is the champion. It's run every year, and the prize money is 500 million Korean won, which is a little bit under $400,000 US.
Wow.
And all of the prize money goes to the winning team. 2nd place and 3rd place get nothing.
Fascinating. So it almost reminds me in America, I used to do track and field when I was in high school. And I remember you would do on the track, you could do like a relay race where you had, 4 teammates and each of you would take turns running on it. It's almost like in this format, you have to be thoughtful about your best player. Do you have them be the first person to play or the last? I would imagine you'd probably want your best player in the back of the stack.
In these competitions, they always put their best player as the anchor, as the last player.
I see.
Up.
Got it.
But yeah, there have been some really interesting moments in the Nongshim Cup because it's possible for a player to win lots of games. There have been 4 occasions now where a player has won 7 games in a row.
My God, wow.
Yeah, which is insane. And the most recent Nongshim Cup was actually the most exciting because a player from China, She Hao, he did win 7 games in a row for China. And eventually he faced Shin Jin So, the strongest player in the world, who was the anchor for Korea. And at that point, none of his teammates had won a single game.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So he was the last player. She Hao was the first player from China. So no one from China had been eliminated. Japan still had 1 player left. So Shin Jin So, he had to beat the 1 Japanese player left and the entire Chinese team for Korea to win the Nongshim Cup. And the reason why it was so exciting is because Shin Jin So ended up doing that.
Oh my gosh.
And it had never happened before that a single player had defeated an entire team. It was just absolutely insane.
That's incredible. That almost leads you to believe that in a nutshell, you have much more depth on the Chinese team. It sounds like in this particular round, the Japanese team was just, a level below, it sounds like. And then you have this incredible depth on the Chinese side with how far Xiao Hao went. And then that was all sort of nullified by the one top player in the world, Shinjin So, against that.
That's exactly how I see it as well. China, for as long as I've been following the professional scene, China have had incredible depth. It's from interviews that people have translated for me. The Chinese players get the same sentiment. They've sometimes said that winning a world major is easier than qualifying for it or winning a Chinese domestic tournament, because in the world majors, you often don't play the Chinese players. You'll play Japanese or Korean players who tend most of the time to be weaker. And I have to say that I kind of agree, because the Chinese Nongshim Cup teams of the past 8 years, it's typically been Ke and then 4 players who seem to change every year. That's how deep the talent in China is. Whereas for Korea and Japan, it'll often be 80% of the team is the same for the last 4 years.
Interesting. So the fact that China can interchange, replace those players, and you're still having a pretty high level of play or a win rate shows you just how much better they're doing from a depth perspective. Does that show in your mind this sort of sense of the current status quo between the three, I believe you guys call it like the three kingdoms, right, of Go?
China have so much depth. They have perhaps 20 players that could win a world major.
Wow.
But it's frustratingly, it's typically one player from Korea that stops all of them from winning.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Whereas Japan, actually, they haven't won a world major. I think the last time that it happened was Choyu in the LG Cup, and that was in 2006.
Wow.
And I think that was around about the same time that they last won the Nongshim Cup as well.
Interesting.
And it was a few years ago where they came second in the Nongshim Cup, and that was considered to be a notable achievement, that they actually didn't come last
right
for the first time in a long time.
Interesting. Now we're going to listen to an interview that I did with Devin Fraze. He's well known in the American Go community for his work with organizing and also his website for getting people to find a local club where they can play in person. Take a listen. Devin Fraze, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
All right. So Devin, first, I just want to give a little bit of a background for listeners. So Devin, you are, I believe, in Columbus, Ohio, and you are youth director for the U.S. Go Congress. You're the central regional representative for the American Go Association on the board. You're a Go teacher at various schools in that area, as well as a lead organizer for your local club, and as well as being a founder of the Ohio Go Association. So really having that huge background from an organizer perspective. Your big mission is really being a big advocate for local organizing to be the lifeblood of Go. Is that fair?
That's right. That's totally true. One quick correction. I was the previous youth director, and then the past couple of congresses, I've actually been helping more with media creation on the eJournal team, streaming and stuff like that. And people may also know me from helping stream various events like the North American Pro qualifications and Transatlantic Pro tournaments and stuff like that. But yeah, my main focus, as you just mentioned, is and will be and has been Go organizers. Because to me, I think organizers are essentially the lifeblood. It's the community that people fall into or discover online or in person that generates a deeper, longer lasting love of Go. Those who learn the game but then never connect with anyone usually stop playing. So
maybe we can get started a little bit and go back to the beginning, because I think you have some really fun and interesting stories. The first is that you stumbled upon learning the game actually by accident through the board game Othello. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, and that's exactly right. I, as a child, had Othello, or maybe Reversi, on my father's computer at home and thought it was pretty fun. And then as an adult, I had found a kind of meetup group for humanists who wanted to play board games. So I was curious about that, ended up going to the meetup and seeing what I thought was Reversi or Othello. And I said, hey, wait, you guys have this game? And the gentleman who must have brought the board or knew something about Go said, wait, hold on, you know this game? But he didn't know enough about Go to know. He said it goes by many names. I'm not sure. I'm like, is this Othello? He's like, it goes by many names. I have no clue. So we started to play, and in Othello, you flip the pieces. And in trying to do that, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, where's the other color? And he's like, you don't know this game. So he taught me the actual rules of Go. And it something about it just clicked. The feel of the stones, the patterns just tickled my mind in a special way. And I think I may even have just started on 19, which is pretty wild. So 19 by 19. And played the whole game, had a great time, played and without any sort of care in the world. And by the end of it, was hooked. And went off. He mentioned there's an anime. So I went off and watched Shikaru no Go.
Of course.
Yeah, as many did, and got super hooked on that because it felt very much kind of like Pokemon, but real. That was exciting to me. And shortly after I learned as well, I also ended up going on a cross-country bicycle ride where I just sold everything and stored a couple books and whatnot, and then rode south and west. And as I traveled, I felt like some sort of like wandering samurai, like kind of sharpening my sword on each town's Go master. I would seek out Go in a city I went to, and I learned a ton that way.
And so as you went through and you went to these different Go clubs, were there any particular noteworthy stories that you had?
Each club was kind of unique. And, maybe this kind of has led to some of my belief that the club is the heart blood of, the Go community. So one kind of short story, it's not quite during that journey, but as I was traveling and seeking Go, there existed once upon a time a website called findgoplayers.com. I wound up in Tucson, Arizona. And sorry, this actually is prior to the website existing. But okay. I wound up in Tucson, Arizona, and stayed with my father there for about 3 months and studied Go a lot. There was a local 5-dan who didn't know any Joseki, but just had used spaced repetition learning to absolutely grind his Tsume Go, and he was a pretty strong player. And there's a 1-dan who kind of took me under his wing and taught me the way. And there's also kind of, I think this 5Q, and I was around his level at that time, who I became friends with. His name was Guillermo. So, and then this is how we get to the website. Later, I am back to my traveling roots. I'd actually headed down to South America, to Costa Rica. And of course, I want to find Go. Anywhere I travel, I'm always looking for Go. I'd used the website, findgoplayers.com, and there was a gentleman in the middle of nowhere, Costa Rica. And I said, hi, my name is Devin Fraze. I'm traveling around here. And he's like, Devin, like, it's Guillermo from Tucson. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I met you on my previous journey, and I'm traveling again now, and I'm using this website, and I've run into you. So it made me realize how amazingly connected and small the Go community is in a way. I ended up meeting with other Costa Ricans down there as well, but this friend took me in for like 2 weeks, and we just played Go by the river every day, super long sessions, played a big 10-game series. It was good.
What was that process like once you said, okay, this is amazing to have this ability to locate where clubs are all over the place. I want to create Baduk.club. What was that process like?
Right. So my, professional background is actually as an educator. And then I do work for income as kind of doing real estate stuff. But I was so moved by this experience, being able to find players around the world, both just on my own with Google, but also with findgoplayers.com. 2 issues occurred. One with Google / the AGA's listing. It was never clear what information was up to date or not. And that always bugged me. I couldn't, see, you do a lot of digging, like maybe on Facebook. It's like, okay, this club last posted 3 years ago. They're probably not active anymore. Yes. Or on the AGA side, there's just no information at all about when something was, updated. And then unfortunately, findgoplayers.com ended up shutting down. And I had actually reached out. I somehow figured out who the developer was, and I reached out and said, hey, I'm so sad to see this shut down. What happened? And he said, there's just a cost to keeping it up. And then there's also the time he spent with fixing bugs. He didn't want to manage it anymore. So I actually asked him for the code. He sent me the code. It's in a language that I did not write, Ruby on Rails. Searched for quite a while trying to figure out somebody who could maybe get the site back up who knew Ruby, but couldn't find any volunteers, which is probably smart on their part because I'm sure it would take a lot of work and been painful. But I did the perhaps stupid thing. I said, well, you know what? I don't care how hard it's going to be. I don't care what the costs are. I'm going to create a site that allows people to find clubs and players and can also tell them what information is up to date. And that was kind of the birth of the idea. And I founded it initially with my now wife's brother, but he's not a Go player. And so while he has some coding experience, he kind of quickly burnt out. So I ended up having to learn everything on my own and rebuild it on my own. And that's the current iteration. So I've just kind of been doing that, for almost more than 4, maybe even 5 years now.
I think, Devin, it sounds like it speaks a lot to your personality and your background you sound very flexible on trying different things and just seeing where they go and not being dissuaded by some of the challenges that come ahead. I wish I had more of that in my spirit and my personality. Yeah. So you touched a little bit on these initial experiences with Go, which were really enjoyable. And if anybody does have a chance to go to the European Go Journal, I believe it was back in October of 2022, I highly encourage you go there because there's a great interview of Devin there. But you made sort of these big life decisions. And one thing I remember you saying is that you connected with some of the Buddhist philosophies and the parallels that are drawn between Go and Buddhist philosophy. So for example, I know Professor William Cobb, who I think is emeritus now, he did write a whole bunch of essays that talk about some of those parallels. And he discussed things like karma, the overcoming of self, non-action, attachment, detachment, all these sorts of things. So for you, Devin, what concept resonates most with you in terms of Go and its connection to Buddhist philosophy?
Right. Yeah. I think Professor Cobb's books may have been some of the first things I read. I think one of the Go books he might have written. And then also I've come across some of his writing on, it might be Tricycle kind of journal, a Buddhist journal online. And it's deeply inspiring. I'm not a religious person, although I was, and then I'm still want to live a meaningful life and a philosophical life. And Go's felt like it's enriched that for me because it's so much different than what our traditional Western mindset looks for in a game. Chess really being the epitome. In chess, you basically start with the board full of pieces, and then you kill and destroy until one person has dominated the other. Versus in Go, board starts empty, kind of beginner mindset, if you will, and you build and create until you reach equilibrium. And so that was kind of a clear, kind of very Eastern parallel that I found. And then the hierarchy of pieces. In chess, kings and queens are the most important, and pawns are meaningless. And
right.
Of course, in some way, does match our life, but it's all about how you view it. And I think it's important to understand how our minds control the world around us in a way by affecting how we perceive things. And whereas Go, every piece is equal. One piece may be more important in the context of a certain situation, but even then, that can be an imagined importance. All the time, Q players are, not my stone, not my singular stone, that does nothing. Please don't kill it. And they save this the small guy and shun the rest of everyone. So it's kind of this very collective game where the pieces and how they connect matter more than just the individual pieces themselves. And I thought that was very meaningful. So some of that philosophy kind of came out. And then the last thing that kind of resonated with me in regards to some of the Buddhist philosophy is more the practice itself of playing Go. I can't say that I'm a very good Buddhist myself. I kind of borrow, different ideas, but the closest thing I do to practicing meditation would be deeply concentrating on Go and letting that be a mirror to the self. I feel like when I play well in Go, when I feel like I'm playing well, and when I show up to a tournament, I think very much more about how I'm overcoming the self. I'm not playing my opponent. I'm saying, what is the best game I can play today? How do I not give into greed? How do I not give into fear? And, those kind of emotions and control those things within myself. And how do I let go of stones that are important and just not let any of that affect me and find truth on the board? And when I do that, I play great Go and I feel good about it. Even if I lose, I don't mind. It's not, it's not about winning or losing per se. But when I give in to those kind of like less noble aspects of oneself that we all face, then I feel like it's a problem. And I feel like honestly, as you start to approach the dawn levels, I think that's much more what Go becomes. Obviously, you need to know some good josekis and you should practice your reading, life and death. But yeah, knowing kind of yourself well enough and how you react to things is really critical.
I appreciate that. And it's a really good connection back to something else that you were saying in that interview with the European Go Journal. You were saying you felt like Go was very much more about your experience with the world than anything else. It wasn't just about, a board and some pieces. And these concepts of balance, these concepts of self are very powerful. I mean, we like to connect what we want to, right, between the activities of our lives and also these games. But I think there's some really compelling stories there, which I think attracts a lot of us
I agree.
to the game.
I've heard many people say life is Go. And so I was kind of talking about how Go reflects into my life. Not how my life reflects into Go. It goes the other way, and how Go reflects into my life. And, making me see all these connections and understand the world, giving a educational term, kind of giving a scaffold for how we perceive things. And because of that, very unique, infinitely open framework, it shows a lot of parallels in life.
I don't think it's a stretch to say that many of us, we get hooked by Go because of its difficulty. You touched on something earlier around our sort of day and age and what people get interested in from a background of social media, technology, those sorts of things. Do you think there seems to be some irony in the fact that it's, this is a very challenging game, and that might be the thing that has a lot of people just never engage with it to begin with? And then at the same time, those of us that have been drawn in, that was the very thing that did pull us in. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think there's a huge kind of debate in the community, and I'll tell you where I stand, of course, on it as well. But the debate being, how do we market this game? I think almost all Go players would love to see others enjoy its beauty as well. And the question is, do we share the game and do we say, hey, it's so easy, anyone can learn in 2 minutes, which is true? Or do we say, hey, this is one of the hardest games out there, which is also true. And, there's one concept where the idea is we could see Go emerge in the same way that a group of friends go to play 9 holes of golf or pick up a game of tennis or something. And that would be, beautiful in a way, kind of this casual expression of Go. And I do see much of, what happens at club kind of being some of that more social, casual aspect. But I think you're right. I think it's the challenge that drives people and especially keeps people engaged. I find that most players, once they feel like they've stopped improving, they can lose interest and not keep engaged. And I think it is the challenge very much that can inspire and keep people engaged. I typically basically say both. I say, hey, this game is going to be really easy to learn, take a lifetime to master. And I think it's just important to admit that it's both. If we try to pretend it's just easy and then people discover the difficulty, then they'll say, wait, the heck, this isn't what I thought, we were doing. This is way too hard for me. But if we just offer it as a super hard game only for the elite, that can turn people away as well. That being said, I do think it's worth erring on that side. And the reason why is because our society oftentimes holds up the things that are, quote unquote, elite as things to strive for by saying, hey, those who play this game are striving for something greater than themselves. And they're trying to achieve a difficult task that is almost certainly going to be more appealing to most everybody, even if it's not appealing in the moment. I mean, especially if someone's sucked into a hedonistic lifestyle of scrolling on their phone and, just kind of, being couch potato. But at the same time, I think anybody that does that or has done that, I've done that myself at times.
Sure.
I kind of grow sick of myself. I'm like, what is this? And then I look for meaning, I look for challenge. And I think Go should be there and ready to pull people out and act as an antidote to the reels and the YouTube shorts and stuff that are just these shallow attention grabbing things, and saying, hey, you can become much more present in the moment with Go. And there's actually a great quote I love from mathematics: think deeply of simple things.
That's a really nice quote. And I think it gets back to this point of like, maybe Go can function as somewhat of an antidote, right, to the sort of the clickbait, the quick, instant satisfaction, right? Like you said, of going through whatever it might be on social media. Let's talk about one way that you've actually been able to very much manifest a community in a very literal sense. So you have this product you just mentioned called the Baduk House that you have in Columbus, Ohio. Tell us about that. How did that come to be? Where are things now with that project?
Sure. Yeah. During my bicycle trip, ended up living at a commune for a while, about 100 people. It's one of the kind of longest going communes in the country, called Twin Oaks, and it was a really magical place. Part of what instilled in me the power and the benefit of community, and to be able to connect more deeply with others. And I've kind of carried that forward in many ways. For a while, in the house that I own, I was renting out various rooms to just normal people, but it was still with a kind of community focus, and keeping those connections in mind, and how we interact with one another. And at some point, I was driving a friend across the country to her new home, and she'd been an artist who was doing residency programs. And you might have artist collective where some people who are maybe who run the collective or own it in some way say, we want to invite artists from around the world to come live here and work in their own studio and do their art, and be given time and space to do that. And so those people, can apply, and they can stay for, various different, limits for different programs. And so it could be 2 months, it could be 6 months. It could have a stipend, that helps them feed themselves. It could be completely paid. They could be making money, or it could be volunteer. And essentially they're not making any money. They just have free access to space and time, and some collaborators perhaps. And I thought that was a really neat idea. And it also made me think about kind of like monks of old time, people that were very devout to, their religion might become a monk, and then they would live in the, this, monk hermitage, and they might brew beer or do something to sustain the hermitage while they recite their prayers or do whatever, it is that monks love doing. And that kind of made me think, like, man, go. Some of the Go players out there are pretty devout. They're pretty dedicated. And I wanted to call it a kind of a monk hermitage. And my artist friend is like, that sounds a little culty. Like, you should go monk, have like Go residence. And I'm like, great, I love it. And so from there, I kind of had this crossroads where my housemates who I was renting to had all moved out, and I had the choice to either in that moment go seek other people to live with and try to make more money, or because I had some other avenues for income, I could actually try and find Go players and do this whole crazy monk residency thing. So I did. I just went for it, and something about coming up with a crazy idea and trying to execute it really gets me going. So
cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. So I just created a website and blasted it out there. People responded, really excitedly. I had 6 people the first session, 7 people the second session, dwindled a little bit to, I think, 3 people the third session and 2 people the fourth session. But each time I'm essentially kind of learning, how to do it better, how to communicate expectations better, and what does or doesn't make sense for a residency program. And so that's kind of what got me there. And if you want, I can tell you more about kind of how it's gone since.
I appreciate that. And one thing, Devin, that I saw some time ago, it was fairly recent, you really came out with some great clarity on your program. And if somebody wanted to apply, here's what the expectation is around having the aspect of learning and studying. That's obviously key. You don't need to be approaching Don level. You could be theoretically any level. It depends on the makeup of the cohort. But then the other aspect is giving back to the community, particularly with your background, right? You're on a full-time basis. And so I really appreciated that. I'll be honest, as a person, I have a wife, children, a job. It's a bit of a dream to be like, maybe I could apply and go and do this. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I think I've heard from other people as well that are the moment might not quite be right, but it seems worth aspiring to or being interested in anyway. And to your point, creating more clarity around what I was seeking. Initially, I was kind of like, hey, come and then we'll find a way for you to give back. And after a couple of iterations of that, I realized that Go players show up with all sorts of different life experiences. We always joke as Go players, like, oh, look, another programmer or something, another mathematician. And there's certainly a lot of us out there that do those things. But it's truly a wide diversity of people. We have artists, musicians, lawyers, all sorts of folk. And when they show up in the Go House and you're kind of like, all right, cool. Like, let's throw you into this project that I need help on, or, have you go teach in these schools. People don't actually have necessarily the skills in that area, and it becomes very challenging to manage all that. So that was kind of the first learning of trying to put square blocks in round holes was tricky and not effective. We still got some stuff done. It was still very fun, but it wasn't great. In the second session, we kind of accidentally stumbled into covering the North American Pro qualifiers 2 years ago, and it went well. I mean, the people united around making that happen, and then also I've had help from that same crew for running my own local tournament, and they excelled. But in all the time between, there wasn't as much getting done in regards to kind of community support. We, a lot of good games played in the house and stuff like that, and the club is vibrant. So that's always been nice. But the study aspect seems to go well, but the kind of like give back part has been a challenge. But the second one made me realize that, maybe we can give back in regards to, running or helping run events, because most Go players understand innately how an event works. But it also turns out that still, even then, there's a lot of kind of gap between like what might be needed for running an event and then what people are able to do. So, last but not least, I said, wait a second, this was based on artists' residencies. They don't call for artists, and then when an artist shows up, say like, I know you've never painted before, but I want you to do this, I want you to paint the big mural now.
Right.
Like that's just not how, obviously not how they work. They say like,
Sure.
Hey, this residency is for painters, like who can paint, show up and do this thing, or, apply with kind of the art you want to create. And if, we think it's good, we'll support you. And so that's kind of been the latest iteration of the Baduk House. So, I'm making a call to any Go players out there who would love to, kind of live and study with other Go players in a serious manner, but also who, love the Go community and have ideas for ways to give back. Maybe much like your podcast. So you would definitely fit the qualification here, even though it might be difficult for you to take a little bit of time away from your family. But those are the kind of people I'm seeking. People that say like, I want to go do something great in the community. And, it could be anything. And any strength, any age, any one. But you're right. I mean, there's some kind of connection of cohorts. So if I get 20 applications, and, I might do some jigsawing to figure out who would fit well together. And I will kind of give one preview to the future, because at this point, not a whole lot of action from that. A couple applications, but it also was an experiment to see kind of what would come of it. And I think essentially most players are, in your shoes, or they really love Go. And there's just really nothing else but how much they love Go. Now in Columbus, we've attracted some of those players, and they actually moved here full time. I think we've had like 4 or 5 people move to Columbus full time.
Wow.
Yeah, super strong players too. And some of them not so strong, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's been nice kind of putting the flag down and having people appear. But I think in the future, we may aim for, finding perhaps like a resident pro and saying like, hey, if you want to come study Go, and honestly, that's all you're going to do, come. And I think that's a much more clear kind of value ask for people. We're going to have it be a kind of a serious, Go house. And maybe there's some sort of giving back that can occur occasionally. I think that part of the program, such as like running an event, like I need helpers. Everyone's always been super, willing to help in kind of like these basic ways. So carrying that forward, but maybe focusing more on in the future, the actual study aspect as well. So we'll see. I'm going to keep experimenting, just like Go. You play a game, you lose, you review it, and then you play again.
Devin, it's incredibly energizing to hear the different ways that you are tinkering this in a very open and transparent way. And that's how it feels like that's how change happens. And that's how things move forward, whether it's in some moment or if it's, slowly over time and a critical mass is built. So I really appreciate you walking through that, who you're sort of looking for. We'll go ahead and put, of course, the website link in the notes here, so that anybody that is interested can reach out and touch base. And then you have that art and that science, right, of figuring out what fits, what works together for potential applicants. So thank you for that. That ends the first half of my conversation with Devin. The question I want to ask all of you is, how has Go changed your view of other aspects of your life? What ways has it changed your thinking or how you view the world? So with that, we'll wrap things up, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much.